you've done your fair share of horror, obviously, but this one felt like it was I think the scariest.
I agree with you. I do. I knew right away when I read Oz's script that it was tapped into something terrifying and quite special. And I'm not entirely sure how he dreamt all of this up, but nonetheless he did. And I think it was when I first met him, we sat down um, at the Polo Lounge, believe it or not. And the first thing he said to me, he just sort of blurted it out, was, "I'm this is a movie about my mom, my mother." And I was like, "Well, that's not what you expect to hear when someone's talking about developing a horror film. It's about my mom." And I don't want to talk too much about Oz, but in terms of his own approach, but I think he was processing something about the feeling of parents where they can lie to you, thinking they're protecting you from something, but they're actually still lying to you. And I immediately said, well, that's interesting that you should say that, because this is about my mom for me.
Wow.
Because as soon as I read the Longlegs character, I could hear her voice
Wow.
and I could hear her melodies. Not that she was satanic, but she was certainly touched, sadly, with mental illness. And I grew up around that. And so for the longest time, I've been trying to find in my approach to try and get more personal with my film performances. I've been trying to find a constructive place to put my memories of my mother and her vocalizations and her body language into a character. Uh, I never thought that it would wind up being a character who happens to be a serial killer, but you can do that sort of thing when you're feeling artistic. And it was also important to me that since Longlegs is kind of spawned from hell, that he should have both polarities. I wanted the character she
Mhm.
to be androgynous. I didn't want it to be specifically male or specifically female. It was very important because these energies, if you can think metaphorically and in the abstract, exist in all of us, male and female. And I have met many women with a very strong male energy internally, and I've met many men with a very strong female energy. Whatever that means, it's both polarities.
That is so fascinating. So did you feel like it was a healing experience then for you?
Yes, yes, I did. I guess the right healing and cathartic. It was. I had to put it somewhere. Gosh, I channeled my dad for Dracula, and I channeled my mom for Longlegs. What does that say about my childhood? you know, Connect those dots, but nonetheless, it had to be done. It's healthy. It's healthy to put it in a constructive place. Art is constructive. Destructive is crime.
Mhm. Wow, that is so fascinating. And I guess, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I know you've talked about your acting method quite a bit and how you really are trying to like get your imagination to make you think you're not faking it, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's important.
And well, does your approach change at all when you're playing the villain versus the protagonist?
Well, the villain never sees himself as the villain. He doesn't. To play a villain well, you have to the character has to believe that what he's doing is ultimately good, even though within the context of the narrative, it's the antagonist and it's on the wrong side. If you play a villain thinking what you're doing is bad or wrong, then it won't have that conviction. If you believe in it, and specifically in this case, Longlegs, I think, really believes on some level that she is doing some good, on some level, in that warped mindset, that this is productive in some way.
Mhm.
And in a way, he is like an old mother trying to guide Lee Harker. to the dark flame.
Yeah, totally. And so along those lines, how do you kind of prepare for a role like this? Because I know you've talked about kind of like using objects sometimes, or like, I mean, did you study the occult before this?
Oh, I mean, I read a lot of philosophy. I like to read, and I went through my period for 4 years where I was reading a lot of esoteric myths, philosophies, you name it. I was looking at all of it. Dion Fortune, uh, Jakob Burma. I was reading different things, but no, that wasn't what it was. I think the script itself, the idea that I was aligning forces with Oz Perkins, and that he hails from a family, pretty huge thespian shoes from his dad, and then also that I was coming from a family as a nephew, and all that. That I thought that there would be a mutual compassion for one another and a camaraderie, but also that I was challenged because his father's work in Psycho is so compelling to me that I was like, well, what is Oz going to get up to? I'd already seen Oz's powerful Gretel and Hansel movie, and I was a fan of his style and his very clear signature as a director. And I wanted to walk around in his world. So that was one thing that I was very excited about. And then also, I started rehearsing Longlegs as soon as I got it. And I'm talking about 2 years ago, 4:30 in the morning on Christmas Day. And I just started hearing my mother's voice and like going through the rhythms and oh, there she is. And she used to say to me, you look just like a little bird when you were born. And I was like, yeah, that's Longlegs. So I'm doing this at 4:30 in the morning. Everybody else is getting ready to open presents and whatnot. And I'm doing this very dark character and trying to infuse it with love. It's a very strange dynamic.
Yeah. Does that take an emotional or like psychological toll on you?
No, no,
You
no.
can get out of it.
I am a craftsman. I know how to get to a place. I mean, it's been so long now, 45 years now. I mean, been doing it so long that my access, thankfully, to my imagination and to my emotion is at my fingertips, and I know how to bring it when the director says action, and then how to leave it and go home. I'm not, you know, that I'm not torturing myself, so to speak. Or at one time I was, when I was 19, I was, doing movies like Birdie and thinking, oh, we all have to be Robert De Niro and Raging Bull, and we all have to live the part and all that. And because I had no proper training, so to speak, I learned through experience and watching movies. And I also learned how to get there without having to torture myself and go complete method insanity.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting because one of the you mentioned when you got your period of philosophy. We had talked about that at the Globes, and you made a comment about like becoming like a kite without an anchor.
Oh yeah, that. Well,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
If you read enough dense philosophy and esoteric books, no one and you really, and I was reading it, for lack of a better word, religiously every day for 4 years, and meditating, and people were like, what the hell are you talking about? I can't, where is this guy? What planet is this guy? I don't know how to have a conversation with you. What do you mean a pelican is also a vase, a beaker that the alchemists use to cook things and try to find gold? I mean, what are you talking about, Nick? And so I realized that I wasn't making any sense to anybody anymore. And then I quickly stopped and came back to Earth. or to Mother Earth and stop looking for the stone, you know?
Yeah, but that's so interesting that that having as many roles as you do doesn't have that same effect. You're able to kind of to put it off and take it down, like you said.
It's necessary. It's
Yeah.
compartmentalizing. It's necessary. It's I have tried to pour yeast onto the imagination and fertilize it so that I can, when Oz says action, I can go into this character and bring something authentic and organic emotionally to it, so it doesn't feel like acting, but at the same time I know how to leave it and keep it fresh, you know. That's just something that came to me from experience and making as many movies as I've made. You know, I think that all the movies I've done, for whatever the reasons that I had to do, whether they worked or they didn't work, they kept my instrument, kept practicing.
Yeah.
The more you practice, the easier you have access to your imagination and to your emotions and your life experience and your memories.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But the difference with me is I wasn't practicing in an actor's studio, and I was practicing on camera. So I mean, just actually through work.
right. That like this, yeah, you learn through experience as opposed to
Right.
education.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you make of this sort of renaissance of horror? I know you've dabbled throughout the years.
Sure. I mean, listen, it's a beautiful thing to see, because I have always maintained that horror, when done well, is genuinely surreal. It's dream logic. It doesn't have to rely on physics of reality. It can allow actors to express themselves in other ways besides that which is considered the arbiter of great acting always, which is 1970s naturalism. Well, yes, that is good, but we've done it again and again, ad infinitum, ad nauseum. What if you're a baby surrealist who wants to do something with film performance that aspires to be like the Beatles' Day in the Life, or Bartok music for Celesta and percussion, or Edgar Munch the Shout? Or what if you want to do that? What you want to mix it up? Well, there's very few places you can do that without people going, "No, he's over the top," or "he's this or that." But you can do it in horror. So now I think even folks at the Academy would have to notice that the people that are in the horror community are really doing something that is breaking free from a certain mold that we're all trying to be put in as actors. And I think horror and science fiction allow us to explore and to open our horizon, our range as film performers.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. I love that. And to wrap up, Nick, I'm doing a profile on Micah separately, and I wondered what if you could speak to working with her.
So Micah is someone I only said maybe 10 lines to in conversation. She's someone that I admired from all the way back to It Follows. Oz didn't want us socializing because he wanted it to be kind of shocking when we're in the the jailhouse room together. But within that day, I said, by the way, I'm a huge fan, and I am. I think that she is effortless. I don't see the acting with Micah. I think there's a kind of childlike quality to her that is extremely compelling and graceful and charming. And when you think about her character as Lee Harker, and the fact that her childhood was robbed from her, and she still maintains that sort of childlike charm, it's very powerful to behold. And so I was thrilled to work with her, and I like that she's, you know, committed to exploring horror films. She's not afraid to do it again and again. And every time she does it, it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That more.
That scene was like, it was intense and so chilling, so good.
Yeah, that was the scene that really was, that was a big scene. That, well, I don't believe in the big scene. I try to get away from that thought, but when I read the pages, like this is going on and on and on, and what are we going to do with all this? How am I going to graph this out so it's not repetitious? How am I going to, you know? And then that's when the things like the moving like this. I mean, I put all that on video on my little iPhone, and I just recorded myself in Vancouver rehearsing it and trying to find different, because you're stuck in a chair. So what can I do in the chair that's going to give it some movement, you know, and some sort of dynamic, some choreography.
Totally. Yeah, no, it was, I was so shocked at how like, yeah, I loved it. And I'm so happy about your willingness to do horror too. Cause I think, you know, the genre can't be elevated if, you know, there aren't good actors willing to do it, you know? So.
And willing to try new things within film performance in different styles.
Yeah, and this one did, you know what, it kind of reminded me of like if David Lynch was like really going full-blown horror a little bit, you know, like it was very, like you were saying, like out there and surrealist, and yeah, it just was so good. So
Yeah, well, I loved working with David too, years ago on Wild at Heart.
I'm Wild at Heart, yes, of course. I know, I
He,
wish you guys could
he let
chat.
me explore with that too. He let me, that was my Andy Warhol performance.
It's one of my favorites of yours. So yeah, that and Bringing Out the Dead. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Bringing Out the Dead was, I just saw that recently because I did a interview for the Blu-ray that's coming out on that. Finally, it went to digital format, so it's going to be very beautiful to look at. But yeah, I'm very happy with that movie.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Nicholas. I hope I get to talk to you again soon. And this was so lovely.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm sure I'll
okay.
see you again. Take care.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you all.